Welcome to Hail to the Podcast, brought to you by the Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan athletics over at michigan.rivals.com for the Rivals Network. As always on Hail to the Podcast, it is me, Trevor McCue, senior editor, joined as always by our Intel insider and publisher, Mr. Josh Henschke. Sir, how are you doing this fine Sunday?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
What is going on there? Oh, sorry. I had the YouTube channel up, so I started playing in my ear.
Oh, yeah.
Tripped me out a little bit. Sorry about that. Good. I have done nothing holiday related at all. It kind of slipped my mind. It was even 4th of July. My wife's band played at the fireworks last night, so she was gone all day doing that. But we did absolutely nothing today. So
nothing wrong with that, though.
Yeah, holiday on a Tuesday is going to make for a interesting week ahead, I guess. But anyway,
yeah, that kind of stinks. But yeah, it is what it is.
So not a busy weekend in the McCue household, but it was a busy June for Michigan football. How do you like that transition? We're going to talk about the 7 commits Michigan received in the month of June. Some wins, some losses. We'll get into that a little bit, including a big commit that just came a few days ago. And what that means for the in-state rivalry with Michigan State. We've got another commit watch coming up with Elias Rudolph on a commitment date coming up here soon. One of those losses, Michael Uini, offensive line, how that impacts the offensive line recruiting one 5-star and somebody I think very likely could be a 5-star. Michigan made some huge progress with them in June. We're going to talk about where Michigan sits with them moving forward. And we want to talk about the 2023 team. The season's fast approaching. There was a couple players. We covered an article about Pro Football Focus that 2 players I think do not get enough credit on the Michigan defense, and how I think the Michigan defense is going to improve largely because of these 2 players. So let's start right off the bat. Like I said, 7 commits in the month of June for Michigan. Owen Wafel, Jaden Smith, a guy shooting up the rankings as we expected. Amarian Stewart, Micah Kahapana, another guy shooting up the rankings as we expected. And 2 edge players, Devin Baxter and Dominic Nichols, followed by maybe the biggest commit on paper and symbolically, Jeremiah Beasley, linebacker from Belleville, Michigan. I have been saying about Beasley every single time we bring him up on this show that that's a guy that back in the day, went to Michigan State every single time. He was MSU lean in the spring, ends up picking Michigan over Michigan State and Missouri. Tennessee was involved early in the year and kind of faded. So obviously, Josh, you've been covering Beasley for a while. So tell me a little bit about this recruitment and what we're talking about, which is what this commit means for Michigan on the field and off the field when it comes to the in-state rivals.
Yeah, I mean, it's big time. I think if you're, a Michigan State fan, you're kind of thinking like, man, this is a big loss. I mean, his half brother? I believe his half brother goes to, Malik Carr goes to Michigan State.
Yeah, half brother. Yep.
Yeah. So there's
who was at the commitment.
He was sitting right next to him during the commitment. Yeah, so it's from Michigan State perspective, this is a big loss, and obviously Michigan's gain here. And if you're Michigan and you're trying to prove that that you're the more dominant in-state program, these are the type of recruit battles that you have to win. You have to get the best players the state of Michigan has to offer, and they did just that. At first it wasn't going to look that way. The Michigan State obviously had heavy buzz. Then Tennessee suddenly started to surge a little bit, and then when Chris Partridge was hired by the program, that's kind of when things really went into Michigan's favor, and ultimately where they won out in the end. But couple his relationship with Partridge, and not to mention the current commits, Jacob Oden obviously does a great job recruiting, and
he's going to have to be on the salary for the recruiting department.
Yeah, right.
With the work he's been doing.
Yeah, no, he's been doing a great job, and he's been responsible for getting them right back in it for Beasley. Both of ththose guys are involved in the 7-on-7 leagues, so they had a friendship there and just kind of grew. So a good in-state battle that Michigan frankly needs to win moving forward. They need to 100%. Win these head-to-head battles with anyone, really. I mean, if you've got a guy you identify in the state of Michigan and you want him, more than likely you're going to have to fend off Michigan State, but you're also going to have to beat them if you want to continue. Just the dominance, I guess, if you want to call it in the rivalry. If you want to be dominant, you have to obviously win on the football field, but you also have to win in recruiting as well. So getting Beasley is symbolic in that regard in terms of Michigan. Flexing its muscles a little bit. I think it did. When as soon as Partridge got in there, he identified Beasley as a guy they wanted, and kind of flexed their muscles really, and worked their way back up from the brink really, and got him. So a good win on the trail for the staff. This will be a kid that will see the field. It's not like this is just a symbolic add to the class that will never see time. This is a kid who's going to see time for sure in a couple of years. So, and again, getting someone from Belleville, obviously the whole stuff, the narratives that's been coming out of Belleville, like not necessarily coming out of Belleville, but the narrative between Belleville and Michigan the last couple of years. I don't know if it's necessarily true. I don't think it's true. But I mean, now with a new coach,
I'll say the former head coach has some tweets very recently that has made me think that maybe there was some beef there.
Yeah, but, I mean, and maybe so, but it's a new era of Belleville football. The only thing that hasn't changed is the quality of players that are still there.
Absolutely.
Obviously, a big fish still left in the 2025 class that goes to Belleville too. So, again,
who could you possibly be talking about?
Yeah, and that goes right along with that. You got to win those battles too.
Yeah.
You got to keep in-state kids at home, and that goes along with Bryce Underwood too. You got to do the same thing. So, a lot
of fans were enjoying seeing him in some Michigan gear in the last few days, supporting his buddy there.
We've been trying to tell you. We've been trying to tell you. There's definitely some increased interest there for sure.
I think it was a muscle move in the same way that when we talk about Michigan versus Ohio State in recruiting, the narrative we hear a lot is, well, he didn't really have a committable offer or an offer at all for that point.
Yeah.
Right. That's why Jordan Marshall was such a big deal for Michigan in terms of facing Ohio State, because that's a guy they wanted.
Yep.
Right. JJ, I would say Donovan Edwards to a point as well, but JJ and all that, there was always these like semantics of, well, they started going after this guy, whatever. They wanted Jordan Marshall. Mm-hmm. Right. Michigan State wanted Jeremiah Beasley. They actually wanted Cole Sullivan as well. And there was some framing for a little bit about who they were trying to focus on in that battle. And Michigan gets both of them. Mm-hmm. I think, when you talk about Belleville and Michigan State recruiting in Detroit, really, in the past few years, even since Harbaugh's gotten here, that's what Ron Bellamy is all about. That's what Steve Clinkscale's all about in terms of those hires, right? We've seen Michigan lose battles to Kentucky because of Klink, right? And then having a guy who's on the ground floor, literally, in terms of high school with Bellamy and the connections to Michigan, we're starting to see some moves there. You can bring up Dante Moore and CJ Carr. I think those are two guys both that were very committed to leaving the state. Carr for different reasons. He's been about Michigan his entire life, right? So whatever. But Beasley just strikes me as a guy that, again, if I think about Michigan and Michigan State recruiting, that was just a guy that always ended up at MSU, and you think about what Tucker's building there. I've said this before. If you're not getting Jeremiah Beasley, I don't know what you're building there. That's a guy you got to land, and that's a big win. And he, Beasley said he really felt like he was going to Michigan for a while. And then after that Missouri visit, was seriously considering Missouri. Mm-hmm. So Michigan had to work hard to nail this down. But I agree with you. Chris Partridge is a big piece of it. When I watch his tape, a guy that plays really, really well on both sides of the ball. I don't know if a lot of people know that. He's an incredible running back. Mm-hmm. Him and Bryce Underwood spent a lot of time together because of that. I'm sure he could have played running back at a couple programs. He's a really good running back. And that's obviously going to help him as linebacker because he's going to be able to read certain schemes and adjust. But when I think about comps and former players and Partridge and everything, I think of Khaleke Hudson, man, a guy that I kind of liked his running back tape almost better than his linebacker tape, but he's a speedy guy. He's physical. He plays way bigger than his size. And I mean, he is a Chris Partridge linebacker, man. He really is. So he's going to do big things for Michigan, I think. And as far as linebacker recruiting now, where do we do we think Michigan's kind of on pause for a little bit here? They've got a few guys they feel good about, obviously, with Mason Curtis, somebody who they think could play above his recruiting ranking as well. Could somebody come back in the fold in November, December, maybe? But is there anybody else really on the horizon now after losing Childs to Florida, now Beasley being in the fold?
Yeah, I think that pretty much, I mean, at least for now, that pretty much wraps things up. You know, Childs would have been the nice, pretty bow on top of things, but you know, it is what it is, and he picked Florida. So, yeah, I mean, I can't, you know, I can't speak to what the future holds. I mean, there may be someone that pops up. You know, there may be someone that, you know, decommits. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you know, just a scenario that could happen. But yeah, I think Michigan is likes what they have at linebacker right now, and I think they're set, you know, at least heading into the season, to, you know, just stay where they are and, you know, kind of see what happens. And we've kind of mentioned this the last couple of podcasts. You know, this program's in a bit of uncharted waters, really. I mean, they haven't had this kind of recruiting momentum this early. I mean, they usually do most of their work in the season. So now they're in, instead of like not necessarily scrambling to fill, you know, visit weekends during the season, now they're in a position to where they can kind of wait and see and kind of wait how things are going to see how you address positions. And that's just not at linebacker. I mean, that's at multiple positions as well, but they can kind of address. Offensive line also, you know, is kind of one of those positions too, depending on how a couple of decisions, you know, fold out here moving forward. But yeah, no, again, I think they're perfectly fine going into the season with what they have and kind of seeing where they go from there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. You think about a guy that got a lot of hype this spring. We talked about Jair Hill, right? Yep. Darius Clemens previously. There's been guys that come in December that they're big gets. They're some of Michigan's big gets. Will that happen again this cycle with them being so full? I think this is part of it too. Shadyville asks, is Curtis going to stay at linebacker and move to the edge? And I think part of why Michigan can kind of be like, aside from the numbers and the amount of players they have already, part of the reason they're comfortable with losing out on a guy or getting a guy is they've gone after a lot of versatility. Yeah. I've brought up Cole Sullivan as a guy I think will end up at edge. He absolutely could be the Mike linebacker in this class. Yep. Right. Curtis is a guy I think, again, is going to go up the rankings, is absolutely looks like a Mike linebacker to me, but he could grow into an edge. Right. There's guys at edge that could become defensive tackles. They're comfortable just with the football players they have and kind of letting it play out. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big part of it too. They're not like, oh no, we need this specific spot. We don't have that guy. They've really got this kind of, we'll figure it out attitude. And with what they've been doing in the transfer portal, if there is a gap a couple years from now, I think they feel comfortable that they'll be able to fill the gap with a guy like Ernest Hausman, right?
Yeah. So, I think with guys that are kind of like tweeners, like a Sullivan and a Curtis, it's kind of hard to predict. Like, it's hard to say with certainty that guys are like, okay, so this guy is a for sure linebacker or this guy is a for sure edge. I mean, you just don't really, especially with Harbaugh too, like, you know, Curtis could be in practice one day and he could kick a football and Harbaugh would make him want to be a kicker or something. Like, that's just what Harbaugh is. Yeah. So you don't really, it's really hard to, like, not necessarily pigeonhole a guy, but it's hard to say for sure, like, what position a guy's going to end up with, because like you mentioned, they do recruit a lot of guys with versatility. So yeah, a guy could very well stay where he's at, or, you know, he could change positions 2 or 3 times before he's done.
Chase Winovich.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think Sullivan is like a Chase Winovich clone.
He is.
So it's hard to say. I mean, it's a legitimate question to ask, of course, but I think it's hard to really give a solid answer because, again, they recruit so many guys with this versatility, with this ability to, you know, not just versatility in their play, but versatility in their body frame and body composition,
right?
Where Ben Herbert, you know, can just do whatever he wants with them and turn them into monsters on the field. So yeah, it's hard to give a specific straight answer, but it's a legitimate question to ask because, you know, you just don't know how these guys' careers are going to fold out and where they end up.
Well, no, I mean, it's worth remembering too. I think we forget just because some of these dudes are grown ass men,
yeah.
Right? But most of them are 16 and 17-year-old kids.
Yep.
Right. So they still have to, we don't know what they're going to become, literally. Right. I think about a guy who was pegged as a tweener during his recruitment, his first couple of years here at Michigan, Chris Jenkins is now 310 pounds muscle, right? Like he's a big dude, and nobody thought he could play defensive tackle because they're like, he's never going to get bigger than 260, 270, right? Yeah. So, yeah, all hail Ben Herbert, right? So,
exactly.
From one commit to a guy we think is going to commit, edge player Elias Rudolph. Henschke has his future cast in for him. He visited Pitt, Michigan, Miami, no longer considering Ohio State. He is originally from Cincinnati, technically classified at Deerfield Beach in Florida right now. Some talk he could come back up to Ohio, but either way, he is committing tomorrow at 7?
Yep, 7 p.m.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Committing tomorrow at 7. Obviously, you have your future cast in there. Do you feel good about Elias Rudolph picking Michigan?
Yeah, no, I feel good about it. You know, I haven't had any, you know, Michael Weenie vibes, you know, last minute changes or anything like that. So usually when I don't get anything last minute, you know, I think the expectation that Michigan's going to be the choice. And I think the staff feels that way. The commits feel that way. I think everyone feels pretty good. I think everyone felt pretty good after his official visit.
Yeah.
You know, I know he's taken visits elsewhere since, but you know, I think a lot of people on the Michigan side of things thought they could not necessarily getting his commitment was a possibility during the visit, but he decided not to and wanted to, you know, finish out his recruitment. But I think, you know, on the Michigan side, a lot of people thought that they could wrap this up and just kind of wait it out. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. You know, I think Michigan is going to be the choice tomorrow, barring something absolutely stunning. You know, I think Michigan's going to be the choice. And, you know, just another versatile piece that adds to a loaded edge room right now in the 24 class. And they're not done yet. They still have one more big fish out there that they're hoping to land in Jacob Smith. So, and he doesn't really have an announcement date, but I'm kind of expecting him to possibly drop on later in July. So, yeah, again, this is a kid that's probably not going to see the field anytime in the near future while he kind of puts on muscle and mass onto his frame. I mean, you're talking about a 230 edge. You know, you'll probably need some work with Ben Herbert. But again, there's probably no better person in the country to work with than Ben Herbert if you're a guy that's kind of looking to build your body composition into being a pure edge. So, yeah, just another talented guy. I don't, you know, obviously he's from Denard Robinson's high school. Well, not from, but he goes to Denard Robinson's high school. But again, this is an Ohio guy that you're bringing in. I mean, this is a born and bred Ohio guy.
Yeah, he played at Cincinnati last year, so he hasn't actually played in Florida yet.
Yeah. So an Ohio guy that's close to home, that understands the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. So it's not like you're bringing in a dude like that from, you know, outside of the state. So, yeah, fully expecting Michigan tomorrow. And again, another 4-star to a really, really nice class. And, you know, that's another position where they can basically check the box of saying that they're done heading into the season. And, yeah, again, you're in a good position there because you can either wait and see what happens or kind of build out your board. And in case anything unforeseen happens, you're not left scrambling last minute to fill some holes left behind. So good spot to be in for Michigan for sure.
Well, you touched on a lot of what I had written down for the next point, which was, like you said, versatile. This is another guy that every time I write, you know, our articles about their top 5 coming out or announcing their commit date or whatever, I like to put like a little blurb in there about just their recruitment in general, kind of player they are. And I don't know how many times I write multi-sport athlete, plays basketball, track and field, whatever, right? That's the guys that Michigan has been going after, which we're seeing this kind of trend in sports in general now. For a while there was like you had to pick your one sport by middle school, and that's all you did, right? Yeah. And Michigan has had a lot of success. Mason Graham pops in my head right now with wrestling, but a lot of success going after these dudes that play multiple sports. And they're athletes, right? Yeah. So Rudolph's one of those guys. I don't think you have to squint too hard to see an Ojabo-like role from him on the weak side edge. I think that's absolutely what he's going to be. And like you said, when you pair him with the Maryland guys, with Devin Baxter and Dominic Nichols, potentially Cole Sullivan moving over to that group. And yeah, Jacob Smith you're waiting on, and still potentially he who shall not be named, Brian Robinson. Right?
Yeah.
Both those guys potentially could be a part of this class. But again, it's one of those, if you get those two, cherry on top, you feel even better, but you like the dudes you've got. I think Rudolph's a real nice addition, and I'm with you. In a couple of years, I think he's going to make a lot of noise. So we go from a commit to a guy that is close to committing to Michigan to a guy who did not commit to Michigan. Like you said, some Uni vibes we got the day before his commitment. So text messages came in, and that moved very quickly.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So we've been talking about, could Michigan go to 6 or 7 on the offensive line? We will talk about the other offensive line in a moment. But as we said, Michael Uni did end up committing to Georgia over Michigan and Bama. So Michigan was in there with some big time programs. This is a guy, I remember before his visit, you and I just kind of brought him up. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, yeah, he's coming on, but I don't know how many moves they're going to make there, right? And then coming out of that visit, Michigan's heavy favorite. We feel really good about him coming. And then it's not till the day before that.
Oh, so we've got a child on the loose. We've got a child on the loose alert. But anyway, but to what's up? Hi, Killian. How are you, buddy? Good to see you. Anyway, to Trevor's point, we've got, Michael Ewini coming into this visit, the Michigan visit. It was kind of like this situation where we're just mentioning him, then a guy that maybe they have a fringe chance, and maybe they could do something. And then as soon as that visit was wrapped up on the weekend, it was like, man, Michigan has a legit shot here. Like, he's like talking like Michigan is going to be the choice. And I want to make certain that he wasn't like, I don't think I would consider him a silent commit or anything like that. Like, he wasn't like saying I am, didn't tell the staff that he was necessarily coming, but he was making some heavy hints that, this is probably the team to beat. And I believe they were the team to beat heading into that Georgia visit. And I think Michigan probably still was heading out of that visit, but Georgia kind of gained ground a lot. And I think one of the main points that Georgia really drove home with Ewini is the amount of players that Michigan had committed already in the class. Like, they had 5 guys committed, and I'm not sure how many Georgia has, but they don't have 5 guys committed right now. So, that I think that resonated a little bit. And, it was one of those situations leading up to the announcement. It's Michigan pulls ahead, Georgia pulls ahead, Michigan pulls ahead, Georgia pulls ahead, things even out. So there was multiple moves there at some point, and ultimately probably like around 10 o'clock, like 2 days before he was set to announce, that's when he kind of told the coaches that Michigan was out of it and that he was headed to Georgia. And then word kind of leaked out that Georgia was going to be the choice. So I think, it was a lot closer than, what it was heading into that Georgia visit. And I really think the way Georgia sold his role, and not, saying, hey, these guys have 5, potentially 6 guys who could be committed, to this class. We don't have that. You have an easier chance to see the field, even though technically he's the higher rated recruit out of all of those guys that Michigan has. But that doesn't matter either way. That's still, 5 guys in a group. So I think, ultimately that won out in the end. And, it's this recruitment's kind of a difficult, it's difficult to explain because, it's like, he would be the highest rated offensive line commit Michigan would have in the class. But at the same time, there's 5 guys committed that are all pretty good in their own right too. So, I don't necessarily want to just go the route saying, Michigan will be fine. I mean, it's a recruiting loss, but at the same time, Michigan really likes what they have with those 5 guys. And I really think even more, Bennett Warren, the guy we're going to be talking about coming up, I think that's kind of like a cherry on top of what they have, just putting a bow on the room, really. So I guess it kind of depends on your viewpoint. Yeah, Michigan lost a guy to Georgia, the back-to-back national champions. Yeah, it's good to be involved in those kind of recruitments, and you got to win some eventually if you want to play with the big boys. But at the same time, too, I don't think this kills the program. I don't think this kills offensive line recruitment. I think they're very happy with what they have, and they'll go from there. Maybe someone pops up again, but I'm not going to sit here and say be all doom and gloom and say this is the worst thing to ever happen to Michigan's offensive line room. It would be nice to have them, but you're also good with what you have.
Over at the Den on our message board community at michigan.rivals.com, I brought up the context of, again, I'm not trying to hedge a loss. I think it is a recruiting loss, but this isn't what happened a few years ago when Michigan was going after the wall. I remember they had a graphic on this, and it was Isaiah Wilson and Jedrick Wills.
Yeah.
Right. So Ruiz was a part of that. So was, why am I drawing a blank? Went to Minnesota. Chuck Filiega.
Yep.
But there were like 2 or 3 other dudes that were supposed to be a part of that group that they lost on. And that was their pitch, was those 5. And then they lost on those dudes. Those were their dudes. Those were clear plan A, right? Mm-hmm. Where with Michael, again, he kind of felt like a luxury player with him taking his OV. I was like, this guy's considering Bama and Georgia and Clemson, and Michigan has just been killing it on these official visits. And again, I think almost every official visit goes really well.
Yeah.
It's bad when an official visit doesn't go well, right? But they're just killing it on these OVs. And you start seeing them trending heavily towards Michigan. And then when the dust settles and it goes time to commit, they pick maybe one of the programs we thought they were going to originally, the safety JJR, who picked Texas recently. That was kind of the thing for a while, but he comes into Michigan. It's like, oh, right. So I think Michigan's really close with some of these where they're trying to pick off guys, but it's clear they're being negatively recruited there for having the 5 guys they wanted already, which is not a bad thing. They're 16 deep on the offensive line right now. Now they know a lot of those guys are going to be moving on after this year, but it's really easy if you're trying to negatively recruit them to kind of point that out. And I have heard the transfers that came in, right? Some talk about that, using that as a negative recruiting tool. That's only going to work if you're not buying into Michigan's culture, which has consistently been competition, right? I bring up, not only did dudes come back instead of going to the NFL, not only did Michigan add these transfers, no one left on the offensive line, right? We knew we were going to be in competition. Bring it on, right? That's the attitude of the players that are here and the players that are coming in. So if that's not what you want, and I'm not saying Michael was running from competition. Like you said, he's arguably the best. He would have been the best offensive line commit ranking wise. But the guys that are here, okay. Right. There's nobody being scared in or out. I love Andrew Sprague at left tackle, Ben Roebuck probably at right tackle with Frazier and Hamilton moving inside. But, if you add Michael Uini, you're creating a head-to-head battle with one of those two, most likely, right? Yep. And you still might, like you said, the guy we brought up, somebody who, again, was initially heavily favored to Texas A&M, takes his visit and has kind of been lingering there. You and I both still have future cast in on him. That's Bennett Warren. Mm-hmm. I think initially it felt like Uini took his OV to Michigan, Georgia, moved up his Bama visit. All of a sudden he's committing. Felt like maybe he was trying to grab a spot at Michigan. That was part of the thought around him as well. So now Bennett Warren's still sitting there. Does Uini change anything? Was he maybe in or out depending on that? Do we still think Bennett Warren's coming? And I'm with you. If he doesn't, is that kind of the last swing and we're good with the 5 we have? Is that going to be the attitude around Ann Arbor? Yeah,
I'm still trying to figure out, where things are in terms of Bennett Warren. Michigan he was very open about Michigan being his leader after his official visit. And then the Uini stuff popped up, which kind of led to the question is, do they take both Uini and Warren? And now it's obviously down to whether Warren wants to come in or not. And I think his Tennessee official visit has given him something to think about for sure. So does I don't know. I'm not as confident that Michigan is going to be the spot for him now. And I'm not ready to completely move off my Michigan projection yet because it was there for a reason. But we'll kind of figure things out when there's a true announcement day for him, and I think he's pretty much done with his officials, so an announcement shouldn't be too far away. So which kind of leads to the next point. What happens next? If Michigan gets Warren, great, perfect. They're done with 6. They've got a really strong class of really good 4-star talent, and if they don't get him, they're fine with 5, and they'll go into the season, the season visit schedule with 5. Do they add another? Do they add a 6th? Maybe. I don't know. I think Sharon Moore and his staff have kind of earned the right to look around and take flyers on some guys. If that's the case, if some recruit has a big senior season that comes out of nowhere that Michigan identifies as a potential guy, that could be a possibility. Again, this is just, it's all basically speculation, but at the same time, Michigan likes what they have. And I think if they were to go 5 the rest of the way until December and February, I think they'd be perfectly fine with that. So if they were willing to go 6, I think, you could realistically think of a scenario where they could add a 6th guy, or just delay this, add the 6th, and just add it through the portal. So that's
a really good point.
Yeah, the portal recruitment has also now become a factor where you can say, all right, if Michigan, let's say hypothetically, Michigan just misses on every single cornerback target that they are recruiting from here until December. So that means that they miss on Aaron Scott, and then maybe they identify another guy and they miss on him too. They're kind of at the point now where they can just say, okay, well, if we didn't get anyone, in this recruiting class, we can go right to the portal and say, hey, identify this guy, bring him in, and you've got your corner. It might not necessarily be a 4-year guy. It could be a 2-year guy. It could be a guy like a Ernest Hausman situation where he plays for 1 year and bring him right in. You've filled your hole. So, that's kind of, which brings me to a totally unrelated point, like the freak out about, where the direction of losing a guy like UNE to Georgia and, the overall temperature of defensive back recruiting. It's like Michigan has so many other ways now that they've proven to be effective in terms of bringing talent in. The transfer portal kind of changes it all. So, you get misses, you can bring some guys in from the portal and be totally fine. I mean, a guy's going to come in. The worst case scenario is you bring a guy in with college experience that has to learn a system, whereas a guy where you have to bring in out of high school, get his body right, get his nutrition right, get him acclimated to college classes, and on top of him learning a defensive scheme, I'd rather take a talented portal guy. So I think, there's so many different avenues that Michigan can take here. And I think they have that kind of luxury that they can do that now because they've just recruited so well this cycle.
Yeah, in terms of filling gaps, I'm with you. Like getting somebody like Hausman, who was Nebraska's top freshman, right? Like they're Jimmy Rolder plus equivalent. They're, Mason Graham at linebacker, however you want to frame it, right? Like they were really excited about him out in Lincoln. So bringing him in, that's a huge deal. And I wouldn't be shocked. A lot of the names we've been talking about this spring and summer, a year or two from now, if they enter the portal and we're like, hey guys, remember that recruitment? Maybe Michigan's got an in here, right? So yeah, I'm with you. And again, if Michigan wasn't back-to-back Big Ten champions with a top 3 or 4 team heading into the 2023 season and a class of 23 or 24 kids already top 5, like things are going so well that you can't, look at the macro, each individual recruitment, and make a big statement about it. But yeah. And yeah, you put this comment up. I hope we don't depend too heavily on the transfer portal like we do with basketball. It's not depending on it. It's just using it to your advantage.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I was going to say.
Like they didn't need Hausman. Hausman coming in arguably Matt Hill, Green, and Moten left.
Yeah.
Right. And offensive line, they were able to upgrade and add competition and depth. AJ Barner, what a perfect fit. Right. Yeah. But again, they've got guys on the roster. They would have been fine. But if that dude, and we said the same thing with cornerback, everybody's been freaking out about CB2 already, like you said. And they talked to a couple guys. If the perfect fit came up, somebody that could come in with experience, maybe some leadership, that he could join the room, but not cause any of the young guys that you like to leave,
right,
then that's something you would pursue. And there it was with Josh Wallace, right? Guy that played in Don Brown's system, which is man defense on the outside, obviously. Former captain, played for 4 years, right? So you use the portal to your advantage. You don't rely on it. You felt good with the dudes you had at CB2, but hey, you are a perfect little fit. We're going to plug you right in there. That's how I think they're using the portal and will continue to. And they're not relying on it in terms of recruiting because they're still going after these big-time recruits. I'm not even going to say potentially. We feel pretty comfortable about Michigan's lead is Gatlin Bair. I'm including him in this group because, again, I do think this is a potential 5-star player. He has rocketed up rankings. The guy is an incredible athlete. We've talked about his speed and Olympic track running ability. He had a home run visit. We say that a lot, but it's hard to imagine a visit going better than the one he had recently. Oregon, TCU, Nebraska in there. It feels like you said it's probably still going to come down to Boise, hometown Idaho versus Michigan for him. This is a guy that's going to be in the 2026 class, but now that we're past June and some of the chaos there, how are we feeling about Gatlin Bair again? I know you've got a future cast in on him, don't you? Or did you not do that yet?
I do.
You do have one in on him. Yep.
Yeah. I put one in there pretty much like right after his visit was wrapped up. I think Michigan has a great shot. Just looking at the competition that Michigan has for him. I mean, you should be winning these recruitments, against Boise State. I mean, that's stuff that you should do any day of the week. However, this one's a little different because, Gatlin Bair's recruitment is different. We're talking about the 2-year mission trip that he's going to take. He won't be at the program until like 2026. So, it's a little different. And, the staying out West has been consistently lingering around him, for quite some time. And, Michigan is definitely giving him something to think about. I firmly believe that Michigan is completely sold Mom and Dad for sure. I think they'd be more than fine with letting him go to Michigan. Really, they're the only really East Coast, not necessarily East Coast, but Eastern side of the country that is really in for him. So the rest are all Western schools. So I think Michigan is number one. We'll see. He's got a visit to Boise at the end of this month. That will kind of determine, we'll see what the outlook looks like after that. But at this time, if you were to announce today, it would be Michigan for sure. I think they did a really good job. The strength and conditioning side of things, the nutrition standpoint was huge. He's going to continue running when he does his 2-year mission trip. You're talking about an Olympic athlete. He's got Olympic level speed that really Michigan's never had before. So this could be a potential game changer on offense for them for sure. But another guy that Michigan is in a great position with, great position with, and they could not relinquish their I would call it a lead. They would not relinquish their lead throughout the remainder of the month. So we'll see what an announcement looks like, what a commitment's going to look like. With the whole mission trip kind of complicates matters a little bit, but I think, I do think Michigan leads for Bair, and they're going to be in a great spot for the remainder of the remainder of this run. And I think they can get over that distance factor. I don't buy that distance thing as much as I used to. Now that I realize, like, hey, these guys have a legit shot here. Like this is legitimate for sure.
I think we talked about this in the last show too. You brought it up. There's a trifecta. You brought up Ben Herbert because of Gatlin's passion for sports medicine is huge. Andrew Gentry is on this team. He's someone who took a 2-year mission trip, and he can speak to what Michigan has done to get him back in the fold. And then Colston Loveland is from Idaho, right? So he was obviously taking pictures with Bair on his visit. He probably won't be here when Bair gets here in 26, but but that's not the point. It's a guy that came here from Idaho with no one here, and he's able to kind of sell him on that, right? That portion of it. So yeah, you like everything Michigan's done. You feel good about him there. And man, yeah, it would be exciting to see. Michigan's had that kind of speed on defense a few times, but yeah, it's hard to remember a receiver with that. I mean, DJ Turner at receiver, basically, right? But possibly faster. I mean, what Bair's doing is insane from a track perspective. So, we talked a little bit about this, hinted towards it, whatever, in the conversation about Scott, but I did want to touch on outside of recruiting that the 2023 season is getting closer. So I'm starting to feel, some of the talk of expectations and getting into where's the team going to be better, et cetera. We've talked about the defense a lot already this offseason, and the fact they don't have a lot of glaring holes. And the big one that gets talked about a lot is, of course, who's going to be CB2 across from Will Johnson. But generally speaking, everyone thinks the defense is going to take a step up because of the defensive tackles we mentioned, because of the group of 4 at the edge, because linebacker has gone from weakness to strength, because of Will Johnson and Mike Sainer still. But for some reason, the 2 names that hardly get mentioned are Rod Moore and Makari Page. And you posted something recently. Pro Football Focus said, based on ratings last year, they're the top 2 safeties returning in the Big Ten next year. And I don't know if that's surprising to people. Rod Moore might be the best all-around safety in the country coming into this season. So back to that Ohio thing. I love when they're like, oh, we didn't offer him. Well, thank you. Yeah, right. Appreciate you not offering Rod Moore. That was a gift. Yeah. So look, for those of you that don't know, Pro Football Focus has Rod Moore as the 2nd ranked overall defender on Michigan's team last year behind Will Johnson. He's rated as the best tackler. He only had, I think, 1 less tackle than Michael Barrett for 3rd on the team. Or for second to be second most, we had 3rd. He led the team in interceptions last year, right? When you talk about the coverage ratings, Will Johnson's CB1, obviously. Do you know who's 2nd and 3rd in coverage ratings for Michigan last year? Rod Moore and Makari Page, right? So a big reason I say I'm not terribly worried about CB2, aside from the talent that they have over there. I know they don't have a ton of experience, but a big reason I'm not too worried is because they have Rod Moore and Makari Page. So I just want to give these 2 guys some praise for a moment. And you had posted that Pro Football Focus article as well. So when you think about the Michigan defense going into 23 and who's potentially going to be the main guys, where do you think Rod Moore and Makari Page fit into that formula?
They're the main guys. I mean, they're right there. I mean, if Makari Page continues on the trajectory that he was on last year, I mean, that's going to be a pretty prolific safety duo. Probably one of the major reasons why RJ Moten is no longer with the program.
Great point.
Because you're talking about Makari Page's ascension last year, which again, all he needed was really comfortability, or comfort. He just needed that to, kind of get his feet wet. I mean, he's had a bit of an unfortunate start to his career. I mean, you're talking about getting thrown out there as a true freshman doing the 2020 season out of necessity because of injury and all of that stuff. But I think he's responded really well. The first year under Mike McDonald was, he was basically nowhere to be seen because you're learning a brand new a brand new defense, and you're learning a whole bunch of new, stuff. He
arguably lost his job to Rod Moore.
Yeah.
The previous year. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think anyone would really lose their job to Rod Moore because I think he's that good. But yeah, I think now that Page has got that comfort, has got that understanding, essentially a third year under the same scheme is huge. And I think that's only going to make him better and take his game to the next level. So really, I think in the back end of that defense, I think Rod Moore and Makari Page are probably going to be your, likely two best guys you've got. And I think they're going to be a huge help for someone of that, that like a Jair Hill or Amorion Walker or, whoever comes as that safe or CB2 or and beyond. I think having those 2 guys really help a ton, not only helping these guys understand schemes and where to line up and things like that, and other tips of what they've learned. But being that safety blanket too, I think that's a big deal. So I think you'll be talking about those two guys as being probably the more really one of the more valuable players on the team. Rod Moore probably MVP of the defense. That would be my early prediction for sure.
I think he's probably going to lead the team in snap counts. When you think about a guy that's not going to leave the field a lot, last year that was Mozzie Smith. This year, just because you've got Zeke Berry and Keon Sabb, two safety corner conversion type guys that I think can learn from both of them. But Rod Moore is going to be to this defense what I think Dax Hill was in 2021. I think Sainer still plays that role a little bit as kind of a nickel safety. But because of whatever you want to call it at CB2, until somebody comes along later in the year, I think you're going to see Rod Moore in coverage a lot. And I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. And I think defenses are going to be avoiding Will Johnson and forget how good Rod Moore is in coverage.
Yeah.
And especially the first half of the year, I wouldn't be shocked if he makes a lot of plays of the ball. So, and then, Makari Page, we've talked about him a ton, going back to last year when it happened. He's one of my favorite stories in the Harbaugh era, period. He's a guy, like you said, thrown to the Wolves in 2020, really demoralized 21, just kind of fighting for reps, special teams. You've got freshman Rod Moore passing him up. It just didn't feel like he was going to be there. And then he shows up last year and takes RJ Mountain's job away. Mm-hmm. and every week gets better and better. He's physical in the run game. He can make plays and pass. He seems to always be around the play. Like, just awesome, man, to see a guy who is, like you said, thrown to the Wolves and kind of lost all of his confidence. A lot of rumors about him potentially transferring. And now, again, he could be one of the most instrumental pieces of Michigan's defense in 2023. So I thought that was cool that Pro Football Focus clip got put out there, and they got a lot of attention because they deserve it. And I think their names are going to get called a lot this fall. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about 2023, guys. Not a ton, though. We're getting there, like 2 months left until football season begins. So as always, thank you for joining us on Hail to the Podcast, but we hope you will join us at Maize and Blue Review over at michigan.rivals.com. A lot of the conversations that we're having here and that's happening in our comment section here on YouTube has been happening all day, every day over at the Den. We really love our message board community. Would love to have you join us over there. Again, that's michigan.rivals.com if you're not already a member. Otherwise, Hail to the Podcast is always live at 6 o'clock on YouTube. Feel free to like, subscribe our channel, and jump in. We appreciate the conversations and take some questions during, always. Other than that, we will see you next Sunday at 6 o'clock on Hail to the Podcast.